My husband poisoned me for months to steal my $8 million inheritance, had me declared legally dead while I was in a coma, and married my best friend with my own money. He told my children I was dangerous and got restraining orders against them, sold our family home, and even had my pets euthanized because no one could care for them. What he didn't know was that the nurse he'd been bribing to keep me sedated was actually documenting everything for me. When I came back from the dead, I didn't just expose his crimes, I destroyed his entire life piece by piece. This is how I got the most satisfying revenge on the man who tried to erase me from existence. My name is Catherine Morrison, and 3 years ago I was living what I thought was a perfect life. I had inherited $8 million from my grandmother's estate, was married to my college sweetheart David, and had 2 beautiful children. Emma was 16 and Josh was 14. I owned a successful interior design business, lived in a gorgeous Victorian home that had been in my family for generations, and had what I believed was a solid marriage of 18 years. The inheritance had come as a surprise. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, had been quietly wealthy through smart investments and real estate, but she lived modestly and never flaunted her money. When she passed away at 91, she left everything to me because, as her will stated, Catherine was the only grandchild who visited regularly and truly cared about me as a person, not just my money. $8 million was life-changing money. David and I talked about paying off our mortgage, setting up college funds for the kids, maybe traveling to Europe like we'd always dreamed. We were careful with it, investing most of it conservatively while using some to make improvements to our house and business. What I didn't realize was that David had very different plans for that money. Plans that didn't include me being alive to spend it. The poisoning started so subtly that I didn't recognize it at first. I began feeling tired all the time, having trouble concentrating at work, experiencing memory lapses that I attributed to stress and getting older. David was incredibly supportive during this time, constantly suggesting I see doctors, take time off work, rest more. "Honey, you're pushing yourself too hard," he would say, bringing me tea and encouraging me to take naps. "Maybe you should consider stepping back from the business for a while." The symptoms got progressively worse. I started having dizzy spells, confusion, and periods where I couldn't remember entire conversations. My business began suffering because I couldn't focus on projects or remember client meetings. David suggested I see a neurologist, claiming he was worried I might have early-onset Alzheimer's like my grandfather had. The neurologist ran extensive tests but couldn't find anything definitive. It could be stress-related, he told us. Sometimes major life changes, like a large inheritance, can create anxiety that manifests in physical symptoms. David seized on this explanation. He started suggesting to friends and family that I was having trouble adjusting to the inheritance, that the money was somehow making me unstable. He painted himself as the concerned husband trying to help his wife through a difficult time. "Catherine's been acting really strange since she got that money," I overheard him telling my sister Rachel during a family barbecue. "She's paranoid, forgetful, sometimes she doesn't even recognize people. I'm worried about her mental state." I tried to defend myself, but my symptoms were real and visible. People could see that I was struggling, that something was wrong with me. David's explanations seemed reasonable to everyone else, even when they felt wrong to me. The manipulation escalated when David started involving our children. He would have private conversations with Emma and Josh, expressing concern about my behavior and asking them to watch out for signs that I might be getting worse. "Your mom is going through something difficult right now," I heard him tell Emma one evening. "She might say or do things that don't make sense. If you ever feel scared or unsafe, you need to tell me immediately." My own children started looking at me with worry and fear. When I would have a particularly bad day with confusion or dizziness, they would exchange glances and whisper to their father. I was losing my family's trust without understanding why. The betrayal from my best friend Sarah came completely out of nowhere. Sarah had been my maid of honor at my wedding, the first person I called with good news or bad news, the woman I trusted with my deepest secrets. We had been friends since college, and our families spent holidays together. Sarah started spending more time at our house during my illness, offering to help with cooking and cleaning while I was struggling. She would bring me homemade soup and tea, sit with me during my worst episodes, and comfort David when he expressed worry about my condition. What I didn't know was that David and Sarah had been having an affair for over 2 years, and that she was actively helping him poison me. The poison of choice was oleander, specifically oleander tea that Sarah would brew and bring to me disguised as herbal remedies for my anxiety and confusion. Oleander poisoning causes exactly the symptoms I was experiencing: confusion, memory loss, dizziness, fatigue, and progressive neurological decline. In small, consistent doses, it mimics dementia or other cognitive disorders. "This will help you feel more centered," Sarah would say, handing me the tea with such genuine concern in her eyes. "It's an old family recipe my grandmother used for stress." I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my best friend, and she seemed genuinely worried about my health. I drank her poison tea gratefully, thinking she was trying to help me get better. As my condition worsened, David became more vocal about his concerns. He started suggesting that I might be dangerous to myself or others, pointing to incidents where I had supposedly acted erratically. He claimed I had left the stove on multiple times, that I had driven somewhere and forgotten how I got there, that I had accused him of moving my things when I couldn't find them. Some of these incidents were real, caused by the poisoning. Others were fabricated or exaggerated. But to everyone else, David looked like a devoted husband dealing with his wife's mental deterioration. The legal maneuvering began 6 months after the poisoning started. David consulted with lawyers about getting power of attorney over my affairs, claiming he needed to protect our family's finances from my increasingly erratic decision-making. "Catherine has been making concerning statements about our money," he told the lawyer, with Sarah nodding supportively beside him. "She talks about giving large amounts to random charities, or buying expensive things we don't need. I'm worried she's going to bankrupt our family." The lawyer recommended that David document my behavior and get medical opinions about my mental capacity. David was way ahead of him. He had been keeping a detailed journal of my episodes, often exaggerated or completely fabricated, and had compiled statements from people who had witnessed my confusion and memory problems. The medical evaluations were devastating. By this point, I had been poisoned for months, and my cognitive function was severely impaired. I couldn't remember simple things, had trouble following conversations, and often felt disoriented and confused. To the doctors evaluating me, I appeared to be suffering from rapid-onset dementia or another serious neurological condition. "Mrs. Morrison shows significant cognitive decline," the psychiatrist wrote in his report. "She demonstrates impaired memory, confusion about time and place, and difficulty with basic reasoning tasks. In my professional opinion, she lacks the mental capacity to make important financial or legal decisions." With this medical backing, David was granted power of attorney over all my affairs. He now had complete control over the $8 million inheritance, our joint assets, our home, and even my business. The isolation was swift and brutal. David used his new legal authority to make decisions in my best interest that effectively cut me off from everyone I cared about. He told my family that the doctors recommended limiting my stress and social interactions. He canceled my business meetings and told clients I was taking an indefinite medical leave. Most devastatingly, he convinced my own children that I was becoming dangerous. The final phase of David's plan began when he convinced Emma and Josh that I had become a threat to their safety. He showed them the fabricated journal entries about my erratic behavior, and told them stories about how I had allegedly threatened to hurt them during my confused episodes. "Your mother isn't herself anymore," he told them during a family meeting I wasn't invited to. "The doctors say her condition is getting worse, and she might become violent. I need you both to understand that if she tries to hurt you, it's not really her fault, but we have to protect ourselves." Within a week, David had filed for restraining orders against me on behalf of our children. The court documents claimed I had made threatening statements, that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous, and that my own children were afraid of me. For the safety and well-being of the minor children, The restraining order read, Catherine Morrison is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Emma Morrison or Josh Morrison. I was devastated. My own children, the people I loved most in the world, were now legally protected from me. David had successfully turned them against me using my poison-induced confusion as evidence that I was dangerous. The commitment to the psychiatric facility happened on a Tuesday morning in March. David had called an ambulance, claiming I was having a psychotic episode, and threatening to harm myself. When the paramedics arrived, I was indeed confused and disoriented from the oleander poisoning, unable to clearly explain what was happening to me. She's been getting progressively worse, David told the paramedics, showing them his fabricated journal and the medical reports documenting my cognitive decline. Yesterday she didn't recognize our children, and this morning she was talking about people who aren't there. Sarah was there too, playing the concerned family friend. I've been helping David take care of her, she told the medical team. She's been saying really scary things lately. I think she needs more help than we can give her at home. I was involuntarily committed to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital under a 72-hour hold that David immediately had extended to indefinite commitment based on my supposed danger to myself and others. The facility was everything you'd imagine from a psychiatric hospital nightmare. I was heavily medicated to control my agitation, which made my already poison-clouded mind even more confused and helpless. The staff treated me like I was completely insane, and my attempts to explain that I was being poisoned only reinforced their belief that I was delusional. Mrs. Morrison believes her husband is trying to poison her, the intake notes read. Patient shows signs of paranoid delusions and may require long-term treatment. David visited once, bringing papers for me to sign that I was too medicated to understand. Later, I would discover these were documents transferring full control of my inheritance and assets to him, signed under the guise of medical care authorization. But David's most heinous act was still to come. 3 months into my commitment, David bribed a night nurse named Patricia Wells to increase my medication to dangerous levels. Patricia was in debt from gambling and struggling to support her elderly mother's medical bills. David offered her $10,000 to accidentally give me an overdose that would put me in a coma or kill me outright. What David didn't know was that Patricia had been suspicious of my case from the beginning. She had worked in psychiatric care for 15 years and had never seen someone decline so rapidly without an underlying medical cause. When David approached her with his bribery offer, she knew something was very wrong. Instead of poisoning me, Patricia began secretly documenting everything. She recorded David's conversations about wanting me dead, photographed the money he gave her, and started saving samples of my blood and urine to be tested later for toxins. On the night David expected Patricia to kill me, she instead gave me a mild sedative and told the other staff that I had suffered a cardiac episode and needed to be transferred to the intensive care unit. She arranged for me to be moved to a different hospital where David couldn't easily access me. Patricia had connections at Memorial General Hospital from her previous work, and she explained the situation to Dr. Maria Santos, a toxicologist who agreed to run comprehensive tests on my blood samples. The results were shocking. My system was loaded with oleander alkaloids, confirming that I had been systematically poisoned for months. Dr. Santos also found evidence of other toxins that had been used to enhance the oleander's effects. Someone has been trying to kill you very slowly, Dr. Santos told me when I was lucid enough to understand. The good news is that now that we know what we're dealing with, we can start treating you properly. While I was recovering in the ICU under an assumed name for my protection, Patricia was gathering more evidence. She recorded David calling the hospital asking about my condition, clearly expecting to hear that I was dead. I haven't heard from Patricia about my wife's status, he told the staff. I was told there might be complications from her treatment last night. When they told him I had been transferred and they didn't have current information, David became agitated. What do you mean transferred? Where is she? I'm her husband, I have power of attorney. You need to tell me where my wife is. But the most damning evidence came from David himself. Believing I was dead or close to it, he became careless about what he said around Patricia, who was still recording everything. Finally, he told Sarah during one of his visits to the psychiatric hospital. "It took longer than we planned, but it's finally over. Patricia says Catherine won't be a problem anymore." "Are you sure she can't recover?" Sarah asked nervously. "Patricia assured me the dose would be fatal. Even if Catherine somehow survives, she'll be brain dead. Either way, she's never coming back to claim her inheritance." They began making plans for their new life together, using my money to buy a mansion in Malibu and plan an expensive wedding. David told everyone that I had died from complications related to my mental illness, and he played the grieving widower perfectly. The funeral was held while I was still in the ICU recovering. David and Sarah organized a beautiful memorial service with flowers bought using my inheritance money. My children, who still believed their father's lies about my mental state, mourned the mother they thought they had lost to illness. My sister Rachel gave a tearful eulogy about how difficult it had been to watch my decline, how David had been so devoted in caring for me, and how tragic it was that I had died so young. The entire community rallied around David, praising him for his strength and dedication during such a difficult time. Meanwhile, David was already moving forward with his plans. He filed life insurance claims, sold our family home, and liquidated my business assets. He even had my beloved cats, Whiskers and Princess, euthanized, telling the veterinarian that no one could care for them now that I was gone. "It's what Catherine would have wanted," he told the vet. "She wouldn't want them to suffer in a shelter." But David made one crucial mistake. He trusted Patricia completely, believing that her financial desperation made her a reliable co-conspirator. He had no idea that she had been working against him from the beginning, building an airtight case that would destroy him completely. After 6 weeks of treatment, I was lucid enough to work with Patricia and Dr. Santos to plan my return from the dead. We had recordings of David admitting to the poisoning plot, confession to planning my murder, financial records showing how he had stolen my inheritance, and medical evidence proving the systematic poisoning. The plan was simple but devastating. I would appear at David and Sarah's engagement party, which they had planned for the anniversary of my death. They had invited everyone we knew, using my money to throw an extravagant celebration of their love. What they got instead was the shock of their lives. The engagement party was everything you'd expect from two people celebrating with stolen money. David and Sarah had rented the ballroom at the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same place where David and I had celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched through the kitchen entrance, seeing them toast their future with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people make in a week. Patricia was working the event as a catering supervisor, her real job that she had returned to after helping me fake my medical crisis. She had planted tiny cameras throughout the ballroom and was recording everything on her phone as backup. "They're about to make the big announcement," Patricia whispered into her earpiece. "David's calling for everyone's attention." I watched from the kitchen as David stood up, Sarah glowing beside him in a dress that cost $8,000. My $8,000. The same children who had restraining orders against me were sitting at the head table, Emma and Josh looking uncomfortable but trying to be supportive of their father's healing process. "Friends, family, thank you all for being here tonight," David began, his voice carrying that fake sincerity I now recognized so clearly. "It's been a difficult year since we lost Catherine, but Sarah has been my rock through the darkest time of my life." The crowd murmured appreciatively. My sister Rachel was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, still believing that I had died from mental illness complications. "Catherine would want me to be happy," David continued. "She would want our children to have a stable, loving home. That's why I'm so grateful to announce that Sarah has agreed to marry me." The applause was enthusiastic. People stood up, cheering for the grieving widower who had found love again. Sarah was crying happy tears, showing off the engagement ring David had bought with my inheritance money. That's when I walked out of the kitchen. The silence was immediate and complete. 200 people went from celebration to stunned shock in the span of a heartbeat. Someone dropped a champagne glass, and the sound of it shattering on the marble floor was the only noise in the room. David's face went through a series of expressions so quickly it was almost comical. Confusion, recognition, terror, and then a desperate attempt to maintain composure. Sarah's mouth fell open, and she grabbed David's arm like she was about to collapse. "Hello, darling," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "I hope you don't mind me crashing your party. I heard you were celebrating our money." The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. People were pulling out their phones, not sure if they were witnessing a miracle, a breakdown, or some kind of elaborate prank. "Catherine!" My sister Rachel stood up from her table, her face pale with shock. "But you're dead. We had a funeral. We buried you." "Funny thing about that," I replied, walking slowly toward the head table where David and Sarah stood frozen. "Turns out reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Although not accidental." David found his voice first, slipping into the concerned husband role he had perfected. "Catherine, honey, you're not well. You've been in the hospital. You're confused." "Am I? Let me see if I can clear up some of that confusion." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the ballroom sound system. Patricia had prepared this moment perfectly, and David's own voice filled the room through the speakers. "Finally. It took longer than we planned, but it's finally over. Patricia says Catherine won't be a problem anymore." The recording continued with Sarah's voice. "Are you sure she can't recover?" "Patricia assured me the dose would be fatal. Even if Catherine somehow survives, she'll be brain dead. Either way, she's never coming back to claim her inheritance." The ballroom exploded into chaos. People were shouting, standing up, demanding explanations. My children were staring at their father with horror and confusion. Several guests were already calling the police. "That's impossible," David stammered, but his face had lost all color. "Catherine, you're sick. You're imagining things. That recording is fake." "Is it? Should we listen to more?" I played the next clip, where David discussed bribing Patricia to overdose me, followed by his conversation with Sarah about spending my money on their new house. "Oh God," Emma whispered, looking at her father like she was seeing him for the first time. "Dad, what did you do?" Josh was crying, confused and overwhelmed by the revelation that his mother wasn't dead and his father was apparently a would-be murderer. Sarah tried to run. She made it halfway across the ballroom before two off-duty police officers who had been guests at the party stopped her. Her beautiful engagement dress was now streaked with spilled wine and tears as she struggled against their grip. "It wasn't my idea," she screamed. "David planned everything. I just brought her the tea. I didn't know it would hurt her this badly." David's lawyer instincts kicked in, and he tried to regain control of the situation. "Everyone needs to calm down. Catherine has been severely mentally ill. She's obviously having some kind of psychotic break. These recordings could be fabricated by someone with her condition." That's when Patricia stepped forward from the catering staff, still wearing her server's uniform. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, I'm the one who made those recordings. I'm also the nurse you paid $10,000 to murder your wife." She held up her phone, showing the video of David handing her cash and explicitly asking her to kill me. "I have 6 hours of recordings, video evidence of the bribery, and medical proof that Mrs. Morrison was systematically poisoned with oleander for 8 months. The room went silent again except for the sound of sirens approaching. Patricia had called the FBI before the party started, and they had been waiting outside for my signal. David made one last desperate attempt to maintain his innocent act. "This is all a misunderstanding. I love my wife. I would never hurt Catherine." "Really?" I replied. "Is that why you had our cats euthanized? Is that why you sold my grandmother's house? Is that why you took restraining orders out against me using my own children?" Emma was sobbing now, the full scope of her father's betrayal becoming clear. "You told us Mom was dangerous. You said she tried to hurt us." "She was sick, Emma. I was protecting you." "You were protecting your access to my money," I corrected. "And you were willing to kill me to keep it." The FBI agents entered the ballroom in force, immediately moving to arrest David and Sarah. David tried to resist, claiming they had no authority to arrest him without proper warrants, but they had been building their case for weeks based on Patricia's evidence. "David Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy," the lead agent announced as they handcuffed him. "Sarah Chen, you're under arrest as an accessory to attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." The ballroom was in complete chaos now. Guests were crying, arguing, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. My family members were surrounding me, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer yet. But the most important moment came when Emma and Josh approached me hesitantly, their faces streaked with tears. "Mom!" Emma's voice was small and broken. "Are you really okay? We thought you were dead. We thought you died hating us." I pulled both of my children into my arms, holding them tighter than I had ever held anything in my life. "I could never hate you. Everything your father told you was a lie. I love you more than anything in this world." "We're so sorry," Josh sobbed against my shoulder. "We believed him. We thought you were crazy. We let them take you away. You were children. He manipulated all of us. This is not your fault." As David and Sarah were led away in handcuffs, David made one final attempt to salvage his dignity. "This isn't over, Catherine. You'll never prove everything. I have rights." I walked over to him, close enough that only he could hear my response. "David, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. You have the right to spend the next 20 years in federal prison thinking about how you destroyed our family for money you were never going to keep." The look in his eyes was pure panic as the reality of his situation hit him. He was caught completely and undeniably, and everyone he had ever cared about now knew exactly what kind of person he was. The FBI led them both away while the party guests sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. The ballroom that had been decorated for a celebration was now a crime scene, littered with abandoned champagne glasses and the dreams of two people who had thought they could get away with murder. But my revenge was just getting started. The legal aftermath was swift and devastating for David and Sarah. Within 48 hours of their arrest, the FBI had executed search warrants on David's office, our former home that he had sold, and the Malibu mansion he had purchased with my money. What they found was evidence of a conspiracy that went far beyond just poisoning me. David had been systematically stealing from my inheritance for over a year, using forged documents and his power of attorney to transfer money into accounts that Sarah controlled. They had already spent nearly $3 million on luxury purchases, vacations, and real estate. The forensic accountants discovered that David had also been embezzling from his law firm's client trust accounts, using my inheritance money to cover his tracks. His partners at Morrison, Blake & Associates had no idea their firm was about to become the center of a massive financial scandal. Patricia's recordings were devastating in court. Not only did they capture David and Sarah confessing to the poisoning plot, but they also included detailed discussions about their plans to kill me, how to dispose of evidence, and their excitement about spending my money. "The victim was worth more dead than alive," the prosecutor told the jury during opening statements. "The defendants didn't just steal Catherine Morrison's money. They stole her life, her children, her sanity, and nearly stole her future. This was a calculated, methodical attempt at murder motivated purely by greed." Sarah cracked first. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the possibility of life in prison, she agreed to testify against David in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony revealed details about the conspiracy that even I hadn't known. "David had been planning this for 2 years," she told the court, barely able to look at me in the gallery. "He started researching oleander poisoning after Catherine inherited the money. He said it was the perfect crime because it would look like dementia or mental illness." She described how David had manipulated her into the affair by claiming I was already mentally unstable and that our marriage was over. He said Catherine was going to end up in a psychiatric hospital anyway, and that if we didn't take the money, the state would just waste it on her care. The most damning testimony came when Sarah described David's reaction to learning I had survived Patricia's fake overdose attempt. He was furious. He kept saying that Patricia had failed him, that now he would have to find another way to finish the job. He talked about hiring someone to break into the hospital and smother Catherine with a pillow. David's defense attorney tried to paint him as a devoted husband who had been driven to desperation by my mental illness, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the financial documents, the medical proof of poisoning, and Sarah's testimony created an airtight case. The trial lasted 6 weeks and was covered extensively by local and national media. The story of the husband who tried to murder his wife for her inheritance captivated audiences across the country. Court TV covered it gavel to gavel, and several documentary filmmakers approached me about telling my story. But the most satisfying moments came when David's entire life unraveled publicly. His law firm immediately suspended him and launched their own investigation into his embezzlement. When they discovered he had stolen nearly $500,000 from client accounts, they filed additional criminal charges and a civil lawsuit to recover the money. The partners at Morrison, Blake & Associates held a press conference to distance themselves from David's crimes. "We are shocked and appalled by Mr. Morrison's actions," his former partner Richard Blake told reporters. "We had no knowledge of his criminal activities, and we are cooperating fully with law enforcement to ensure justice is served." David's professional reputation was destroyed overnight. The State Bar Association immediately suspended his license pending the outcome of his criminal trial, and several of his former clients filed malpractice suits when they learned about his embezzlement. But the personal destruction was even more satisfying. Emma and Josh chose to live with me during the trial, and they testified about how David had manipulated them into believing I was dangerous. Their testimony was heartbreaking but crucial in demonstrating the full scope of David's manipulation. "My dad told us that our mom didn't love us anymore because the money had made her crazy," Emma testified, crying on the witness stand. "He said she might try to hurt us, and that he was the only one who could protect us. We believed him because he was our father." David's own parents, who had supported him throughout the early stages of the legal proceedings, turned against him when they learned the full truth. His mother, Patricia Morrison, took the stand as a character witness for me instead of for her son. "David deceived all of us," she told the court. "Catherine was like a daughter to me, and he made us believe she was mentally ill. He used our love for him to make us accomplices in his cruelty. I am ashamed of what my son became." The financial recovery was extensive and brutal for David. The FBI seized all assets that had been purchased with my money, including the Malibu mansion, 2 luxury cars, expensive jewelry, and art collections. They also froze his personal accounts and placed liens on any property he owned. I hired a team of forensic accountants to trace every penny of my inheritance that David had stolen. They discovered purchases I never could have imagined. A $50,000 watch, a boat he had bought but never told me about, even plastic surgery for Sarah that had been charged to a credit card linked to my trust account. "Your husband spent your money like a lottery winner," my attorney told me. "Boats, cars, jewelry, vacations, gambling in Las Vegas. He went through $3 million in 18 months like it was pocket change." The civil recovery lawsuit was even more devastating than the criminal charges. I sued David and Sarah for treble damages under federal racketeering statutes, seeking not just the return of my stolen money but additional punitive damages for their conspiracy. David was forced to liquidate his retirement accounts, sell his share of the law firm, and turn over any remaining assets to pay the judgment. Sarah, who had been a successful real estate agent before the affair, lost her license and faced personal bankruptcy. But the most satisfying revenge came from the community that had once supported David. Our church, where David had been a deacon and where he had spread rumors about my mental health, held a special service to pray for my recovery and publicly apologized for not supporting me during my illness. The pastor mentioned David's crimes during his sermon, using our story as a lesson about the dangers of greed and deception. "We failed Catherine Morrison when she needed us most," Pastor Williams told the congregation. "We listened to lies instead of showing Christian compassion. We must do better in recognizing when someone in our community is being abused." David's golf buddies, business associates, and social friends all distanced themselves from him publicly. Several people who had attended the engagement party gave interviews to local news stations, expressing their shock and horror at what they had witnessed. "I thought I knew David Morrison," his former golf partner told Channel 7 News. "We played golf together for 10 years. He talked about Catherine's illness all the time, and we felt sorry for him. To find out he was poisoning her. It's beyond comprehension." The criminal sentencing was the final blow. David was convicted on all charges: attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. "Mr. Morrison, you systematically destroyed your wife's life for financial gain," Judge Roberts said during sentencing. "You poisoned her, stole her money, turned her children against her, and attempted to have her murdered. Your crimes represent a level of cruelty and premeditation that demands the harshest possible sentence." Sarah received 12 years for her role in the conspiracy, and she was ordered to pay restitution for her share of the stolen money. As David was led away in handcuffs, he looked at me one final time. Gone was any pretense of innocence or victimhood. In his eyes, I saw pure hatred and the realization that his life was over. I felt nothing but satisfaction. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new home, a beautiful house I had purchased with my recovered inheritance money, watching Emma and Josh do homework at the kitchen table. My health had completely recovered once the oleander was out of my system, and my relationship with my children was stronger than it had ever been. Patricia had been given a commendation by the FBI for her role in stopping David's crimes, and I had set up a college fund for her daughter as a thank you for saving my life. My sister Rachel, who had felt terrible guilt for believing David's lies about my mental health, had become one of my strongest supporters. "I should have known something was wrong," she told me. "You were never crazy. You were being murdered, and we all helped him do it." The most meaningful recovery was my relationship with my children. Emma and Josh had been through extensive therapy to deal with the trauma of their father's manipulation, but they were healing. They understood now that I had never stopped loving them, that everything David had told them about my illness and dangerous behavior had been lies designed to isolate me. "Mom," Emma said one evening as we were cooking dinner together, "I'm sorry we believed Dad about you being dangerous. I know you would never hurt us." "You have nothing to apologize for," I told her. "You were children caught in an impossible situation. Your father used your love for him against all of us." The money, which had caused so much pain and destruction, was now being put to better use. I had donated $2 million to domestic violence shelters and organizations that help victims of financial abuse. I had also established a foundation to provide legal assistance to people whose family members were trying to steal their inheritances. Most importantly, I was alive. David's plan to erase me from existence had failed completely. Instead of making me disappear, his crimes had made my story known to millions of people. I had received letters from abuse survivors across the country, thanking me for speaking out and giving them hope. The man who had tried to poison me, steal my money, and murder me was now serving 25 years in federal prison. His accomplice was behind bars. His reputation was destroyed forever. His children knew exactly what kind of person he was. And I was free to live the life he had tried to steal from me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply surviving and thriving while your enemies destroy themselves. David Morrison had bet everything on my death. Instead, he had guaranteed his own destruction. If you enjoyed listening to my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to Crazy Stories Library for more unbelievable revenge tales. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss when I drop a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.